Great, thank you, everyone. That was fabulous. Richard, would you grab a microphone from these folks back here? Or and you have a microphone right next to you, Mats. Yep. And if you guys will share, that should be good. And we can start the Q&A or the discussion. Okay, great. So I'll stay here. I think it'll be a little bit easier with the swirly couches. But one of the things that I've always been challenged with is really how science and intuition don't always align. And oftentimes, folks may have a gut feel, and the insights might go against that gut feel, and then you're faced with skepticism or pushback, and adoption is affected. And I thought it would be great to get the panelists to talk a little bit about how you might address challenges from this isn't what I believe, or this is different than my gut in driving organizational adoption.
I'll go first. So yeah, this is particularly true in my organization, right? Because like I mentioned, we don't have the customer granular data, so we have to bring in a top-down mixed model. So question that we always get is, how do we validate, your number, from the model is true, right? So this is where we bring in a lot other data to triangulate as a way to validate the accuracy of the model. So triangulation is one of the key.
Yeah, I have a comment on intuition and let's say data. Actually, sometimes your intuition says what I see in the data can be true. Yeah? And actually, oftentimes it comes down to data quality. Yeah? So if you don't have intuition, you might take decisions based on data that are completely wrong. Yeah? So an example, if I show you the first examples I gave where you do footfall, yeah? So it's about how many people are somewhere at a certain time. When we first did it with the telco data, we saw there were quite a lot of people somewhere in the sea, near Barcelona. And obviously, you could say, okay, I take it for granted, but it happened that it was just a wrong location coordinates on certain antennas. Yeah? So if you don't have intuition helps you to check the data quality, because that's really still a problem. And then intuition also helps if you want to explore. So what things to explore? In that case, intuition is also very important.
I would love to jump in here as well. So very simply said, I started my web analytics career in the world's awesomest company, Toys R Us. So if you guys don't know about it, go to GoFundMe and search for Help Save Toys R Us. So I'm just putting a plug out there. And what I found was there's a lot of value in trusting people's gut decisions. If a person has been working in a company for 20 years, they know their business. And as an analyst or as a hotshot web analyst, what I decided to do is prove some of their beliefs were true by using data and build that relation. So when a month later I walk into a meeting and show them insights or data points that suggest some of the things they were intuitively thinking were not accurate, they would believe me and kind of work with me. But in more cases, I've seen data being a validator for gut decisions, and it's important to value people's judgment there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think one thing that we do as behavioral scientists is that we're able to draw on either research or principles that explain human behavior, which give us an underlying construct upon which we then base our perspectives. And so if we come in with a scientific principle of, hey, this is a theory that basically outlines how we expect people to behave, or this is why we think people will behave in this way, that gives us credibility. And then the second thing we do is, my function does a lot of incubation, and oftentimes before we approach a senior executive to say, hey, we recommend that you build this, we'll go run some really low cost, low fidelity, medium fidelity experiments that just provide some initial directional evidence to say that the approach that we're proposing makes sense.
Great, thank you everyone. So there's intuition and gut feel and the insights and great examples of how to really drive that or dispel that skepticism. But as marketers look to data scientists to prove out their models and validate, how do you know that the models are right? What are the things that either marketers can ask or scientists can show or demonstrate to prove and validate that the truths coming out of the model are in fact truths?
So oftentimes, right, for example, for modeling, we typically show the, the error rate, the accuracy rate, right? That's a typical approach that we use to share the accuracy of the model with the marketers, and that's when typically we'll get them on board, right, seeing that high accuracy. And then we also do a lot of testing, right? For example, when we build a new model, we'll use it as a beta version and then do the forecasting for a short period of time, and then do the back testing, meaning looking at the actual coming in as compared to the forecast and see how's the error rate, accuracy rate, right? So this way to get the marketers on board and being convinced that hey, what we deliver is actually pretty good, and that's how we get in.
So I can probably jump in next. So I look at validation from two standpoints. The first one is, am I building the best model with the number of signals I have available? So for like a company like Google, we are exposed to multiple signals, and we can push that into our models, use machine learning to figure out how much credit should, say, go to an individual set of touch points. But where the kind of rubber meets the road is when you use those signals and those fractional values and start optimizing your business, are you doing better than where you were? So there's always a process of creating a validation data set, running this against that simulated data set, using holdouts to see, well, if my scores have changed and I've added a new signal, has that improved the performance of the business? And if it hasn't, then it hasn't helped us kind of roll back. From a client perspective, if I'm using a solution that's off the shelf, is this the best solution? Is it working correctly? And I'll share one example with one of our top agencies. They had reservations about using a Google model, and they recreated the model. We gave them enough details that they could build or recreate a one-time analysis on how the conversion credits flow around. And they were almost up to 2 decimal points exactly to what we were producing out. It took them time to run the model and build this hypothesis and get the results. But we always recommend that you validate the data and validate the model results to make sure you feel comfortable before you use something. And then really the crux is it needs to help you improve your business when you use it. If you're not improving your performance, then we've just shuffled numbers around.
Just to add 2 things to make sure that the model is right. First, there are always let's say the technical measures like the area under the curve or the confusion metrics with false positives, false negatives, etc., which gives you an indication. And then in many cases, you have the opportunity to backtest the model, which is you do the model, you run it on historical data, and actually you predict with a model, you predict the future, but the future already has happened, and then you can compare what you predicted with what already happened, and that is a very good indication of the quality of your model. But it's not always possible to do that.
Yeah, thanks. So as a behavioral scientist, not as a data scientist, when we're coming in and we're looking at something, we've got a pretty strong perspective on, is this from a behavioral perspective going to change customer behavior? And so we will try to, even before we build a model, really validate that ahead of time by building something that is a proxy in order to test whether or not even the output of what we're going to use the model to do even makes sense when it comes to engaging the customer. And then we will build the model, but we'll build it iteratively and make sure that the customer that we're identifying within this set is actually responding to what we're trying to target them with in the first place. And so again, we bring a slightly different approach, but highly iterative would be my answer.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Next, I want to talk a little bit about actioning the insights, because I think I've been involved in many studies, and as they're about to kick off, you hear of folks, marketers that said, oh yeah, we did that study before, but we didn't get any action out of it. And there's nothing worse than hearing that there was this great insight or this great study that was done or any of the above that just wasn't actioned. And would like to hear from you all, what are some best practices to ensure that the insights are actioned?
Sure. So I can go in first. So I had my slide, and I didn't talk too much about it looking at the clock. Attribution plus actionability is better together. And this is really the crux of what we are trying to do with Google Solutions as well. One way to act on it is looking at the numbers and having MMM studies and inferencing. A part of your media is helping certain parts of your business better than the others, and so you should invest X in those media points. The second element is how quickly can you act on this data. And if you look at just search, for example, bids are real time. The value and the cost of a bid changes almost every second depending on who is searching for it, which device they're on, which city they're in, what time of day it is, and the value changes as well. For us, actionability is the key, and that's why products like Google Attribution, we're building it with not just the view set of giving you better reports so you can look at them and make strategic decisions and inform parts of your business, but push this straight into solutions which are used for bidding for this media. And by doing that, you're giving the right credit at the right time in a real-time fashion. So when you're bidding for a media touch point, you know exactly what its worth is based on your conversions and whether you should go up for that auction or stay back for that auction. And by doing that, you've kind of brought actionability to the front and center of media optimization. So yeah, it's the core.
Thanks. Hear from Richard or Emily?
Yeah, this is a very good question. This is a very common challenge to analytics and data science team, right? And this is something I continue to challenge myself and my team to answer, the so what, right? Whenever we start doing a analytics or data science exercise, we always need to ask ourselves the so what component, right? For example, my team did a KPI analysis looking into whether certain metrics can be used as a KPI, right, for stakeholders. But then, so we used, an analysis such as correlation analysis. We even look into granular causality tests and see whether, this particular metrics can predict the business outcome metrics. We do prove it has high correlation and good predictivity, but then the marketing team will ask us the so what, right? If I'm not spending in this, for example, social channel, this is where the metric is, then this doesn't matter to us, right? So how do we take that forward? How do we build even further insights? For example, how can we separate out paid social versus organic social and use that and build out some kind of the so what answer in order to help marketing organization answer, hey, can your analysis help me decide how we spend paid social and whether this will contribute, whether this will help the measures move, which will contribute to business outcome. That's the key, right? So that's a common challenge, and this is where we always need to dig into the so what.
Great. Richard?
Yeah, so I think if you have no action to the insights, then it is as if you hadn't done anything. Yeah? So it's very important. Some best practices from my experience: team up with the business. So actually make the business the lead on the whole activity. So then you are more likely to get it turn into action. And then also what can help is that you track the value chain of the insight. So you start with the insight, you discuss it with the business. First you say, did they like it or not, or they think it's interesting? But it's the next step whether they actually plan to do something with the insight. That's a next step to track. And then actually whether they actually did something with the insights. It's a kind of funnel. And then what was the outcome of applying the insights? If you do that during a year, you get a kind of funnel, and then actually you have a very good case. Where are we? Yeah? Are we doing something interesting, or are we just staying in the beginning and really no action happens?
Great. Thank you. I think that our time is up. Thanks to our panelists. And I'm sure you can find them over coffee if you have any questions.